ask you to our amazing photographer, Phoebe. Please do check her out. She is absolutely wonderful. And sadly, Helen can't be here with us tonight. She has an emergency, but she has been a huge part of this exhibition coming together. She's the she's the founder of Artsy, who have been doing this exhibition in collaboration with us. She runs a digital gallery, and if any of you have looked at the digital gallery, there's a QR code at the back, and you can see more artworks, and some of these artworks also in the digital space. And there's a couple of digital artworks on there as well, which is very exciting. So a huge thank you to her, although she is not with us. I also want to say a huge thank you to this amazing panel. Like, I actually can't quite believe how privileged I feel to sit with you guys. It feels a bit unrealistic, to be honest. Who will all introduce themselves. So first I'm going to do a quick overview of the exhibition for people who haven't had a chance to read about it, and a little bit about our collective, and then we will intro the panel and crack on with the talk. So Underground Muse has been put together by my gorgeous co-founder of the Lydia Smith, and I, over the past maybe about 5 months now. Yeah, it's been a little while. And it's all about reclaiming the narrative of the Muse. So it's an all-female exhibition. There are 5 artists in the exhibition, all of which are part of the newly formed The Collective, which is about creating time and space really based on Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own for artists to be able to practice in this space. For female artists, as we will very much dive into, it's a little bit different, and some would say a little bit more difficult. And really the point of FEE is to be able to create that time and space and really nurture the next generation of female artists. So Underground Muse is based on a concept. I don't know if any of you have heard of the idea of a muse, but initially this concept was formed many years ago, and it was about 9 Greek goddesses who were inspiration for science, for literature, for the arts, and they were very highly esteemed and looked to by people like Homer and great poets and philosophers. It's probably fair to say the idea of muse hasn't aged particularly well, and today it is more a desire for somebody who might have more of an allure or could be possessed quite often by male artists. Because of this, there's been a real lack of narrative from female artists, and in my view, it means about half of history, if you say 50-50 split, is only seen from like a male's perspective rather than a female's perspective. And there have been some amazing artists, from Artemisia Gentileschi, Judy Chicago more recently, and my personal favourite, Frida Kahlo, who very famously proclaimed, "I am my own muse." And they've been really claiming their own narrative. So this exhibition is about reclaiming this narrative. And for myself, the whole premise of this exhibition is found in Celia Poole's quote, where at the end, where she says that she is Lucian Freud's muse, and she's lost her narrative, and she wanted to do something about it. So she created a story of her own. So that's a little bit about the exhibition. Here we are doing a conversation about the matter of the muse. So I'm quickly going to introduce my amazing co-founder, Lydia Smith. She's co-founder of Muse, also co-curator and producer of this show, and is also a very esteemed artist herself. She has exhibited very widely. If you'd like to know more about that, look at her CV and bio, but I won't bore you. And looks at human connection with subcultures of ancient history, science, and I feel like I'm going to miss out technology. That's very important to yours.
Very important.
Yeah, so that is Liz. Addie, if you want to continue on your own.
Hi everyone, I'm Addie, or Adeola. I'm the curatorial manager at Artsy. I'm a trustee for Hospital Rooms and the founder of The Other Art Girl, which is a blog that champions women artists.
Hi, I'm Ruth O'Sullivan. I'm a writer and curator. I am also an editor at Trebuchet magazine.
Hi, I'm Aleksandra Ziemiszewska. I am the co-head of our Contemporary Day auctions in London at Sotheby's. I've been working at Sotheby's for around 7 years across different roles, but auctions is very much what I specialize in.
I'm Alina Davey, I'm also from Sotheby's, and I look after, I'm head of a department called Collectors Group, and it's big family collections that have grown over the last 20, 15 years with many family members involved in the collection. And as we'll be very interesting to discuss how the collections are formed based on the gender representation.
Amazing. Thank you so much all for being here. So here we are really here to talk about, to quote the amazing Linda Lachlan, why have there been no great women artists? It's a big question. So we're looking at particularly at the perspective of the Muse. So we are going to start with you, Alina. There's been some incredible exhibitions recently. The first female solo exhibition at RA in its 250 years with Marina Abramovich happened in 2023 to 2024. And why do you think that is, that in this day and age, it's only just now are females really being on the big stage of the art world?
Well, I think actually I like to look at the question in a sort of from a critical point of view, because I think we're all labeled as gender representation, and there are so many other exhibitions, for example, at Pompidou and in France have been labeled or around women in abstract art or women old masters and to contemporary, and you wouldn't find any male exhibition labeled by gender. So it's great, and what I would like to say, it's great to see one artist represented, and we've seen other kind of exhibitions at Tate over the last 5 years just focusing on one artist. What I personally would like to see is more exhibitions like Marina Abramovich, like Genchirova, like like Kusama and many other female artists, where we look at the retrospective of an artist rather than grouping women by or just grouping exhibition by gender. So, and then we talk about why it's now, why is it happening now, why museums pay attention to female artists. But I also think that it's the reflection of the change in the society and the role of women in today's corporate world, in social roles. And I think what we see now, the change and the reflection in the art market is exactly mirrored by what's happening in the social change. And I think the more women have access to education, to great leadership in corporate world, and I think we will see exactly the same mirrored reflection in the art world. And if you think, actually, it's great in London. We know that we have women directors at Tate, and now National Portrait Gallery. But if you think of the world greatest museums, the Louvre, the British Museum, Metropolitan, they've never had a female director. Again, we look at leadership roles in the art industry in general, so not just the artists. And I think access to education, which probably was definitely lacking 500-600 years ago when we were looking about the old masters, female artists who were either trained by their fathers, if we talk about Gentileschi, or some other similar representations, again, where fathers taught their daughters. However, there are some great examples like Rachel Reich, who had 10 children. And she continued creating, that was obviously the golden age of Dutch art. And she created these magnificent works that are widely collected. And if you think about Marina Abramovich, I remember seeing her at the interview, and it was a big discussion with lots of women. And she said she chose the career of an artist and not a mother, because women in their role as mothers, and that would affect what she produced. But what's also interesting, you cannot, if you're a mother, if you don't have children, you cannot really judge women or artists with children. And we have great examples again today. So I think regardless of what we label and what we would like to focus on, I think women's role today in general, artists or socially, just reflection of the whole progress, the change that's happening today in the society. And this is why we're having this exciting conversation.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's just picking up on what you're saying there with the education. I think it's really interesting. So it wasn't until the late, I get this all wrong. So 20th century, 19th century, there we go. 19th century that actually females were even allowed to be within universities and actually have formal education. That wasn't, like you say, having education through a father figure or somebody else as an apprentice, and even then they wouldn't really be taking on females as artists.
And quite often that's why the female artwork was represented in a landscape or some domestic portraits and wasn't considered an important fine art. It was more sort of decorative style.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I guess, so kind of moving on a little bit and just really building on what you're saying there. So what do you think, what support structures and what education, or maybe broader education, what support structures, social networks, space, like female artists really need to be able to thrive in this contemporary scene? Perhaps we can come to you now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it all goes back to education, doesn't it? And this is what Linda Nochlin says a little bit in her essay as well. You know, she mentions that what would happen if Picasso was actually a girl? Would his father push him to be as great as the artist that he became? And I think it's quite a good question. Would a little Pablita get the same, encouragement from parents? I think we have fortunately moved on from that quite a bit. We have now very different support structures in education, from kindergarten, primary, high school, then to universities, where institutions try, I think, quite consciously to ensure that there is a certain equality. Some with more, some with less success, but I think that we're trying to guarantee as a society the same access to education for both men and women. And it is a work in progress, right? It takes generations to really take effect. But what we are seeing, quite fortunately so, is a lot of women working in the arts. We see a lot more curators, a lot more art directors, and I know that they're not directors very often of the largest museums, but we are seeing, even in London now, as Alina mentioned, regular appointments, and all of that really helps, I think, artists today. In terms of support structures, I mean, what you guys are doing looking at the feeds, this is really what's needed, isn't it? It's the sharing of experience, actually the support, the help all of you are contributing today by being here. To really what is needed to make it. But the sad reality, I think, is it's still very, very proactive to be an artist. Whether you're probably even more so when you're female. I'm sure that Lydia, you'll speak about it later on.
But I write with my middle name.
It takes a village.
It takes a village. It takes a village.
And I think what you were saying there, Aleksandra, that I think I feel like someone is going to fully correct me on this stat, but there's something quite substantial. It's over 50% of the workforce in the art world is female. But there's a huge disparity on, even so when artists graduate from art school, the amount of females actually enter into the art world as artists opposed to professionals is a lot lower than male artists, which I think is really interesting. And I don't actually really have an answer to that. Maybe it's a question that people would love to explore. I hope you guys can. But I do think it's this interesting thing that there's a huge amount of professionalism within females within the art world, and yet there's not a lot of female artists.
We're, I think, again, seeing. It's scary when you look at numbers, I'm not gonna lie. The record, I think, still for a living female artist at auction is Jenny Savile's props, which sold for $12 million. And this is against Jeff Koons's $92 million sculpture, which is quite a big difference. For any female artist, I think the record still is Georgia O'Keeffe's painting, which made something like 45 million. Against, of course, the Da Vinci painting, which you all would have seen at Christie's a couple of seasons ago, which made just 400 million more. So it's scary. It's the same with museums, right? Like looking at acquisitions, where there was a recent study, I think 2 years ago, done across 30 museums in the US, just directed at acquisitions and what was the percentage of female artists in acquisitions. And that percentage was 11. Which is crazy. However, when you look closer at the data, the 11% actually is all acquisitions, which includes gifts. And when you look just at the purchases that museums made, that was, I think, around 50-50 or even 55 towards female artists, peaking in 2019. So there is a very conscious effort to correct these things, and I do think that we are certainly, and I speak for us at Sotheby, there is a conscious effort into presenting female artists. We have a look at, our recent day auctions and even evening auctions. There will be very often a female artist opening an auction. And this is, yes, maybe we follow the market a little bit and what is commercial, but just because all of the heads of sale are actually female, we also do feel like if we can, we will choose a female artist to open an auction. Not for any other reason, but just we want to actually participate in this. And that is something I find is quite amazing. But it will take some time to correct all of this. It's definitely not done. And yeah, it just takes a lot of these different elements to really fall into place.
Yeah, thank you. That's such an interesting insight. And Victoria Pollock seems to highlight that the marginalisation of women within society, and we all know, as you were saying a little bit earlier, that it's so much more than just the art world. It's about more of society and wider society, about why female artists aren't getting to the top. And there is a marginalisation that has historically happened, and there isn't much social mobility for female artists. So on the social side of the art world, Adi, perhaps we can come to you here, who runs a very glorious blog called Another Art Girl. What do you think that this digital era has really helped female artists to gain a little bit more prominence or more voice?
I would say the key areas have been relationship building and accessibility. I think for a long time, women artists weren't visible to people, and institutions, whether knowingly or unknowingly, excluded women artists from a lot of their exhibitions, their collections. Now that the internet has sort of democratized the art space in a way, women can build their own communities, they can build their own audiences, they can connect with collectors, with other artists, with gallerists, with women-owned galleries. So it's created a very big shift in terms of the opportunities available for women artists. So I think in that way they can nurture and establish their own platform in a way that they couldn't in the past, and they would have needed financial support or just vocal support from other men in their lives. So I'd say that's a big
so spot on. And Ruth, you've very recently curated an amazing exhibition called The Future is Female, which has Barracks, featuring the one and only Lydia Smith. Yeah. What do you think, what's the role within the female collaboration, and how do you think we can best support one another in building this?
Well, I think, as you were saying before, what you're doing here, working together, that's a really important aspect of sort of women going forward in the art world. I think in terms of the general narrative about women's art, there's still, in some academic circles, it's still quite dismissed, I find. And this is not no one would say it's unimportant, but it's sort of viewed as niche. And it's not the norm, it's not the main experience of life, right? So I think for women, it's about supporting other women and amplifying those voices. And I think the really basic things you can do are host exhibitions with other women. What I try and do, I would say the majority of articles I write for Trebuchet are about women artists. That's not always a conscious thing, it's kind of what speaks to me, but I find that quite an important thing to do, is amplify those voices, because it's pretty hard to get press coverage, everyone knows. And so when we were doing The Future is Female, for example, the video will attest to this, I kind of felt that sculpture was one industry where women, one sector where women were really lagging behind in terms of representation. Like, I love Henry Moore and I love Anthony Gormley, but if I see another one there, artworks, I'm going to scream. So what me and the people I was working with really wanted to do there was to create a space that was like, we're going to really amplify female voices in female sculpture, because that's an industry where women, a sector where women are underperforming in. And it's also less commercial, so it's difficult to get into the commercial galleries with sculpture. So, like I said, it's just actively doing things, write about women, by women artists, guys, and put on exhibitions with other women.
Yes. Yeah, thanks. And Liz, you're obviously an artist, female artist working in the space. What does it mean for you to be a female artist? And how do you think you can most authentically live that out in this market?
It's such an interesting one for me because I actually started fully committed to my art practice during the pandemic, which is also around when female artists were getting a boom. So I've always been labelled a female artist, and I don't really like that phrase because it's part of a kind of trend and a boom. You kind of ride the wave and you're part of female shows, female this, female that, but similar to what Alina was saying earlier, it's not about gender. And also, sometimes I get boxed into, oh, she's a female artist talking about feminism. I'm talking about technology and ancient history. That has like nothing to, well, some bits of feminism in there, but it's not my main thread. Like, I think I only have 2 works that are about like the female experience. Like, it's not my narrative. I don't associate my gender with being an artist. So I'm hopeful that we'll get to a point where I'll just be called an artist because that's what I am. Like, I'm very proud to be female. I think being female has so many amazing like biological traits that come with it, but that's not actually directly associated to my practice and like my job. I think also there's such a stigma around being an artist not being a job, and I can tell you it is. Like, oh my god. So yeah, I think being part of shows and again touching with sculpture, I think sculpture, so many other forms of art outside of painting are behind. I think commercially, because painting's quite easy to sell, people have like wall space to put paintings, they come in different sizes, like it's quite easy to house. Whereas sculpture, you're already appealing to like potentially the 1% because everybody thinks it has to be in bronze. Like most of my work at the moment is like ranging between like 30 centimeters tall to 70 centimeters tall, and it's in plaster, so it can actually go inside people's homes. It's like lightweight to ship. There are actually no barriers currently to buying my sculpture, apart from the perceived barrier that's been created by the art world. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you so much. And final question before we all totally melt, because I'm very aware. What one thing, open to whoever, would you really like to see in the future in proactively making this more equal to work in?
I actually have one which isn't just about gender, but I think it disproportionately impacts women. We see like shocking statistics recently about working class people in the arts in this country, and I think that is a knock-on of other things that are going on, a housing crisis, which then leads to a studio space crisis, right? Mm-hmm. All these things that when you're starting out as an artist are really important to have. If you're living in a one room in a house share in Hackney, which I'm sure a lot of us have done, you're not going to have room to create, or it's going to be really, really hard. So, I think we've seen a lot of like women campaigning in art in the past, particularly in like that Women in Vulture at the Tate. If we're going to campaign, that's something I would really like to sort of see happen in the next couple of years.
Amazing, and huge shout out to the Working Arts Club. Megan, you're still here. Definitely follow them. They're doing absolutely incredible work in that space as well. I think we should come in to land because I'm absolutely boiling and I think we need some air. So thank you so much, guys.